Our cities have evolved beyond the traditional concept of a private residence. Airbnb has become a new way to do this with the comfort of someone else's home. It connects people with short-term stays in private residences and helps them find a place that's close by, safe, and most importantly, affordable. Welcome to Forwolution, a space where business stories inspire exceptional people. Airbnb is a revolutionary idea that was born in 2008 when the founders, Brian Chesky, Joe Gebbia, and Nathan Blekarczyk, had difficulty paying their rent for a time before the success of their company. At one time, Brian decided to take the leap and quit his job in LA and move to San Francisco to pursue his entrepreneurial ambitions, after a phone call with Joe. The rent was high, and Brian had no income. This made it hard for him to make the payments. Both Brian and Joe were website designers. They had just heard about an upcoming designer conference in town and needed to figure out how to cover the cost of renting a room for it. They said, "Why don't we take advantage of this opportunity and rent out our spare bedroom for a few days?" However, Brian never had a bed in his room. Instead, he had an air mattress to accommodate visitors. Inspired by the idea, they decided to establish a business with the idea of air bed and breakfast. They created a website and had a great response, with 3 customers signing up. Brian and Joe went to the conference with their customers and gave them a tour of the city. Their hard work paid off, and they could pay their rent with the money they made on the job. They realized how much potential their idea had. Then they invited Nathan, their old roommate, to join them and make it into a company. Soon, the official website of Air Bed and Breakfast was released. They targeted those who attended the conference in Austin and ended up with 3 bookings, one of them by Brian himself. Half a year later, they relaunched for a convention in Denver and surprisingly achieved a greater result with 80 bookings. They realized people would look for alternatives if there weren't enough hotel rooms. More funding is needed to make the business grow. They hoped that they might find someone who would be interested in investing in their company. While investors are crucial to the success of a startup, they can be difficult to talk with. In the end, they went through a long process of being ignored, rejected, and being left out. There were no investors that were ready and willing to fund their idea, and the recession in 2008 made it even more difficult to find capital. Because the company wasn't generating enough revenue, they suffered and got into debt. These guys came up with the idea that they could sell cereal boxes. They originally purchased the cereal from the supermarket and then repackaged it for resale. By selling 800 boxes at $40 each, the company has earned over $30,000 during that period. However, the sale of cereal was not the perfect solution to fund their business. After 1 year, the company had not yet shown any signs of growth. Realizing that the idea was not sustainable, the founders were thinking about giving up. At the same time, someone suggested applying to the Silicon Valley startup incubator Y Combinator. Y Combinator, which was under the leadership of Paul Graham, is an accelerator program that helps entrepreneurs get their start in the world of entrepreneurship. They focus on mentoring, connecting founders with potential resources, including seed funding for startups. Eventually, these founders had an interview with Paul Graham. At the end of the interview, it did not seem like they would be a good fit. Before they left, a box of cereal was given to Paul. When asked, they explained to Paul their origin story. Surprisingly, Paul was delighted with their resourcefulness to keep the business alive and invited them into the training session. Since then, they are well known as serial entrepreneurs. In a January 2009 winter program, Paul Graham invited many prominent founders to the event. All these startups were given the opportunity to get training and capital. Brian and his co-founders finally got selected by Y Combinator and received $20,000 in exchange for a tiny share of the company's equity. Later, they flew to New York to promote their website with the support of their customers. The company had grown at a rapid pace with the help of Y Combinator and its newly found connections. In March 2009, they had accumulated 10,000 users with more than 2,000 listings. Shortly after, the company was renamed to Airbnb and included a variety of properties. They provided private rooms, homes, apartments, and other types of properties for travelers with different preferences. On the other hand, they helped the homeowner's listing profile have a better quality of online presence. Accelerating growth while learning new things was something that worked well for the company. In under 2 years, Airbnb was able to attract a bunch of big-name investors, with capital funding of $600,000 in 2009, and a huge amount of $7.2 million in 2010. This was giving them access to more capital, market awareness, and resources. By the time in November 2010, Airbnb went mobile by introducing its iPhone app with an instant book feature. By next year, it had accumulated 1 million guests and 120,000 total listings. They began expanding their business overseas and set up the first international office in London. Soon, many offices were opened in multiple European cities, including the headquarters in Dublin. Since 2012, with the growing demand for short-term housing, Airbnb has expanded to other countries. These include Australia, Singapore, and other countries. In 2013, more than 200,000 properties were advertised on Airbnb. It has now welcomed over 9 million guests since it was founded, within the first 5 years. Through their service, Airbnb has solved the problem of finding short-term accommodation for those who travel the world. A year later, Airbnb had achieved decacorn status, which means the company was valued at roughly $10 billion. In 2015, after the easing of restrictions on businesses by the U.S., Airbnb was one of the first U.S. companies to expand into Cuba. Unfortunately, Airbnb has had some challenging hard times. Some properties were left with a whole bunch of trash. They imposed fines or restrictions on the service. There was a time when cities had plenty of issues with Airbnb properties and began to ban Airbnb rentals with a new law. Regardless of the difficulties, Airbnb decided to rebrand and introduce a new logo with a symbol of belonging, which consists of people, place, love, and its own brand, Airbnb. Fast forwards to 2016, Airbnb has grown its revenue by over 80% in a single year and started to make a profit. Incredibly, the profit after 2 years has surpassed $200 million. There were 2 million guests using Airbnb every night when it came to 2019. Along the journey, Airbnb had some iconic programs added to its service. They introduced AirCover, which offers comprehensive protection and complimentary host liability insurance with every booking. Another feature is Host and Experience, which enables hosts to provide activity services in addition to accommodation. It also introduced Airbnb Plus, a collection of homes with validation of excellence, to increase the quality of the customer experience. In 2020, the pandemic caused a 96% decrease in bookings in urban areas, but bookings in rural areas increased dramatically. In order to make up for guest cancellations brought on by the pandemic, Brian Chesky, as CEO, promised $250 million in payouts to hosts. To get through the challenging time, the company raised $1 billion in equity and $1 billion in debt. With the funding, Airbnb offered its enhanced cleaning protocol to help hosts and guests peace of mind when booking during the pandemic. In December of that year, the company went public after raising $3.5 billion in an initial public offering. As a host, they were given the opportunity to purchase shares of the company at the initial IPO price of $68 per share. By the end of the first day, it had risen to over $144. Now, Airbnb has 300 million nights and experiences booked in 1 year. The annual revenue has skyrocketed to nearly $6 billion. It was originally just a way to make some extra cash to pay the rent by convincing travelers to stay in their own homes. The 3 founders' idea to rent out air mattresses led to the creation of a multi-billion-dollar business. So, what do you think of Airbnb? Do you have any experience with them? What kinds of services do you think Airbnb should provide in the future? Please comment. If you like the video, please leave us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and turn on all notifications. A new video will be released on a regular basis. Thank you for watching.